All right, everybody, in this video, we're going to be talking about the top 5 practice mistakes when you're learning to get better at improvising on the guitar. So let's get right into it. The first mistake is not watching this all the way through. Those of you who click off of stuff after 1 or 2 minutes, I don't know how you expect to learn anything. But anyways, let's continue on. Actually, let's get to the first real mistake. So the first mistake that I see people making all the time is noodling. Now, what does noodling even mean? Because we hear this term a lot, noodling. And people don't really know what it means. So I'm going to make a definition for noodling right now. Noodling is kind of like improvising, kind of like soloing, except here's the one thing that's missing between noodling and actually playing a solo, which is rhythm. So you'll hear this kind of stuff at like Guitar Center all the time. You'll hear people going, so that's noodling. There was no rhythm to that. Maybe some people might think it sounds cool. I've had people tell me that it sounds cool when I played out of time. I don't really agree so much. But anyway, that's noodling, right? So I'm going to play pentatonic scale and I'm just going to sit here and mess with this all day long. And there's not really any rhythm going on. But all of a sudden, even if I'm just playing by myself, even if I'm not using drums or I'm not using a backing track or anything, if I start actually playing some rhythm and like count myself off and make sure that I have to stay in time, now I don't really consider that noodling anymore. That's actually practicing soloing or practicing improv. So if I go like 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? That is much less noodling. Of course, there's still not really like a focus going on there. I'm just soloing randomly like an A minor pentatonic scale. But that's the point that I want you to get from this, okay? Don't play out of time. Don't play a solo that is not in time. Play with rhythm because at least you are practicing your rhythm when you do that. Okay, so let's get into mistake number 2. So mistake number 2 is only focusing actually on using scales for your solo and focusing on getting better at scales. People are always looking to practice scales, pentatonic scale, major scale, minor scales, all the scales in the whole entire world. Yeah, scales are important, guys. Like, let's get real. You do need to know scales, but there's a lot of other stuff that you should be working on that I think is actually more important than scales. Let's start with actually what I just have been talking about, rhythm, right? So learn some rhythm exercises. Work on playing with a metronome. Work on playing with drums. Work on actually playing a solo with one note. Can you do something like this where you put on a drum track only and play a solo with just one note and make it interesting with different rhythms instead of focusing on any scales? Right? So that's the idea, is that you got to work on your actual rhythm just isolated from any scales or anything like that. Next thing would be actually to practice arpeggios. So a lot of people are so focused on scales that they forget that actually chords, I think in a way, are a lot more important than learning scales to be able to solo over something. So if we change backing tracks here, what if we play over a backing track and now I have to use only the arpeggios from the chords to solo over the backing track? So in this case, the arpeggios are going to be D minor and then G. So you should know the notes, all of the notes in a D minor arpeggio, all the notes in the G arpeggio, and know them all over the entire fretboard and be able to solo with them. Right? So that whole entire little mini solo right there was played only with arpeggios, no scale, right? So the arpeggios are super duper important. I've talked about this a lot because they cut right to the notes that sound the best on each chord. Okay? So let's move on. Let's keep moving on. So mistake number 3 is not learning new vocabulary. And also, as a part of that mistake, is even when you do learn new vocabulary, you're not practicing it necessarily the right way. So I actually did a video pretty recently on the best way to learn new vocabulary and add it to your solos. Make sure you check that out. But essentially, some people are not learning new pieces of vocabulary, and by the way, I'm guilty of every single one of these mistakes, guys. So if you ever think, he's, saying like he's perfect or whatever, no. I'm actually making this video because I've made all these mistakes, okay? So if you're not learning new vocabulary, you're not really going to be like stretching your ability as a solo. So you can do this any number of ways. You can just learn some random lick off of YouTube. You can get a book full of licks, or you can transcribe a solo by ear. But here's the thing that I was just talking about. If you're not practicing it the right way, it still won't get into your playing. So once you learn a piece of vocabulary, you have to be able to actually use it in your soloing. So how do we do this? Again, watch the video that I made on this already for more detail, but essentially you got to take a piece of vocabulary and then you have to actually change it yourself and make it your own. So anything that you change. So let's just throw this track on. So this is a lick that I used from this video. It goes, whoops. Let's go ahead and get the guitar back up. So this little lick, so that's actually Wes Montgomery lick, but let me change it, make it my own. Right, so you just see right there, that lick started off one way, but then you try to change it and change it and change it and change it. There's lots of other things that you can do. Apply to different chord progressions, change the key, apply it to different songs. So that's the whole entire point though. Once you learn a cool piece of vocabulary you learned how to play it, you ain't done there. You gotta actually practice improvising with that piece of vocabulary, or else it's just not gonna make its way in your playing. Okay, so comment yes down below if you've made any of these mistakes before, by the way. I want to hear from you all. If you agree, do you disagree? Let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree, or comment yes if you have made any of these mistakes before. Okay, so we only got 2 more left to talk about. So number 4 is too many exercises. Doing a lot of exercises like to get fast, to kind of like build your vocabulary up in a way like we were talking about. But essentially the problem is that the exercises might be teaching you how to play legato. They might be teaching you a certain concept, or they might just be teaching you how to get fast. Whatever it is, the point is that if all you're doing is memorizing an exercise, there's so many things that could kind of be messing us up there. And look, there's nothing wrong with doing it if you have all the time in the world to just practice all day, because then you could have your exercise time and then you could go, okay, this is my time just for practicing soloing, etc., etc., and you can hit everything. But most of us don't have all day long, right? So if you want to, let's say, practice legato, don't go straight for learning a crazy Yngwie Malmsteen exercise that has you play legato all over time. Or I don't know who has all these different exercises of legato. I've done some of them. I really don't do them very much. What I do is this. I'd rather, if I want to work on a concept, immediately take that concept and start breaking it down into its smallest components and then improvising with them. So if I want to practice legato, I'm going to do something like this. I'll say, okay, basically, let's just play legato with 2 fingers. Okay, let's stay in a key. Let's stay in the key of C. I'll go to some different notes and play with 2 fingers. So this is all improvising, right? I'm not trying to memorize an exercise. So what's the benefit of this? The benefit is that, number one, I'm actually practicing my improv while I'm practicing the concept I want to work on. Because that's the whole point, right? If you want to learn how to play legato, I'm assuming that the reason you want to learn how to play legato is because you want to use it in your solos, right? So once you've gotten that basic concept down, start improvising with it right away. So we're just cutting straight to the part where we actually use it in our solos. And then on top of that, I am working on my legato and I'm getting all these different variations in there, which are going to help me add it to my vocabulary again. There's a common theme that I talk about all the time, and I talked about it earlier in this video, and I'm still talking about it, which is that you got to create variations of the stuff that you want to get in your playing. So if you're spending lots of time doing things that are ultra repetitive with no variation, yes, they can help you. They can get your knowledge a little bit better. They can get your technique better, all that good stuff, but it's not really going to get your improv better if you're not improvising. Okay, so make sure you're practicing improvising as much as possible in all the stuff that you practice, and you'll get a lot better at improvising. Okay, mistake number 5 that a lot of people make, way too many people make, is not knowing the notes on the guitar fretboard. They think that they're just going to memorize all the shapes in the whole entire world, the cage system, the pentatonic box shapes, and they're just going to think in shape land all the time. Shapes are super duper important, but how do you know where to put the shapes if you don't know the notes in the fretboard? Somebody answer me that. How are you going to know where to put the shapes to play in the key of E flat minor if you don't know where there's an E flat? The only E flat you might know is on the 6th string. 5th and 6th string. That's the only place that like most people know the notes because they play power chords. That's not going to work if you want to be as good as possible. It's just going to be too hard. I actually had somebody comment on one of my other videos talking about the pentatonic scale. I think it was a video actually from last week. And it was showing the pentatonic scale on one string at a time. He said, oh man, it's super confusing to learn it on one string at a time. And I said, that's probably because you don't know the notes on the fretboard, right? And he said, yeah, you didn't know the notes on the fretboard. It's impossible to memorize shapes when you're thinking like, oh, this shape that goes all the way from the first fret to the 15th fret or something like that. You know, shapes work in small areas. They work, in these 3 frets here. They work in these 3 frets. That's fine. But once you start talking about getting all over the whole entire fretboard, you need another piece of information to glue all those little shapes together and complete the whole entire picture. So if you don't know the notes on the guitar fretboard, check the link down below and I will link the lesson that I did on the best way to learn the notes on the guitar fretboard. And I'll give you a little hint. It involves learning the notes and then improvising with them. So anyway, I hope this helped you. Make sure that you are not making any of these mistakes. So let's just recap one more time. Mistake number 1, noodling, which is improvising and playing out of time. Mistake number 2 is only focusing on learning scales. Mistake number 3 is not learning new vocabulary and not practicing it in the right way. Mistake number 4 is practicing exercises without improvising. And number 5 is not knowing the notes on the guitar fretboard. So until next time, everybody, listen, learn, and jam.